Hey everybody, welcome. We are live for another Inkarnate live stream. It's Wednesday, and so today we are going to be creating a cosmology map. Now, there are many ways that you can make a cosmology map, but we're going to be focusing specifically on kind of making this kind right here, where you can kind of see the planets. The scale is up a little bit, so you can kind of see some of the details on the planet, and we're going to be using the shape tool primarily to be making those kind of things. So I'm kind of excited about that. And we're going to be showing you the method in which I made these things. So we have like planets, suns, and then we also have celestial bodies. All these things right here we'll be making today in the live stream. So I'm excited about that. So welcome everyone to today's masterclass session. Let's just go ahead and jump right in. I'm going to start by just creating a new map. I'm going to kind of let that interface pop up. We're going to use fantasy battle maps. It doesn't really matter which style you really start with for this because there's not an official like sci-fi or cosmology style. So it doesn't really matter which one you start with, but we'll use fantasy battle maps because we're going to be using most of the textures within fantasy battle maps to create the planet. So we'll select that. And I'm just going to choose your standard landscape. I'm going to use Ultra 4K so we don't have blurry textures and blurry stamps. We'll let this load up here. Hope everyone is enjoying the new year. And as I mentioned earlier, there's more than one way to make a cosmology map. So what we'll end up doing most likely is having a series throughout this new year of making multiple cosmology maps. Obviously not one every month, but likely we can create a couple more cosmology maps this year because there are so many different ways to create them. So let's start with the basic stuff. I'll generally change my background to black. So set it to the BG layer and go to fill. And then the next step is I need to set some rules for my map, and the rules will help me to kind of decide what planets to have and things like that. And so the first rule is kind of a physics one, and that is that wherever planets that are closest to the sun are probably going to be a lot warmer, while planets that are further away from the sun are going to be a lot cooler. So let's have that kind of a basic rule, and other rules about lighting. So if the sun is the source, the light source, then we're going to want to make sure that the sun is reflecting on the light side of the planet and on the shadow side or the night side of a planet. So we want to set some basic ground rules. Those ones are pretty simple. The more advanced, the more complex your rules are, the more work you're going to give yourself. So don't worry to dumb down or simplify the rules to make life easier for yourself. So don't worry about just going crazy with all these crazy amount of rules. Keep it nice and easy, okay? Don't overdo it because it's just so much more work for you as a DM. So let's jump into making the planets and the suns and the stars and all that stuff. Suns are stars. But the first step is we want to make the largest stamp. And for me, the largest stamp or the largest thing on the map is probably going to be your sun, right? So let's create that. First, we'll go to the shape tool and we're going to choose circle. And then what I'll do is I'm just going to choose a color stroke for now. And I'm going to go over into the gear like this. And I'm going to have no shadow for it. And then we'll choose the fill. And we're going to choose a texture. So we're going to open it up. Now, there's a lot of different textures that might work for the sun. For instance, this hell terrain has some of these lava stamps, and I think these work great. Now, depending on what kind of sun you have, there might be some rules, like maybe it's a red dwarf, maybe it's a dying star, maybe it's a huge, super massive star, whatever kind of star that it is, that's to kind of determine the texture. But we're just going to use your typical star or sun that we kind of have. And so we'll just kind of use this right here. This will work out great. And what we'll do is we're going to hold down Shift and Control, or Start and Control, at least for my keyboard. It might be different for yours. And I'm just going to make the shape. Now, don't worry about the scale for right now, but you want to make it bigger at first because this way you can kind of edit it, move it around, and change it. And so make your planets or your sun first. Make it big. I'm not going to use white for it. I think for the sun, I'll use a yellow color instead. So I'll just choose this yellow color. You could use this one right here. That works fine. Now it's a little straight. Usually with that much heat, I'd expect some kind of blur. So let's maybe blur the whole thing. That might work better. Let's bring that blur up. There we go. And now we have a nice blurred planet there. Now there's a lot of other things that we can add. We can add some shadows to the line work. We can add some further stamps to it. Maybe we want to show like a solar flare or something. So there's a lot of different things we can do. Let's just check out a couple things. One thing you could do is you could use the spell stamp right here. Let's see here. I believe this is it right here. And this spell right here, you can just fit right on top of it. And we'll set it to color dodge, but we'll set it to normal for now. There we go. And kind of scale it in, kind of fit it on there. And if you want, you can also blur this if you wish. And so now you have like these bright kind of rays of light coming out of it. And I think that looks good. And so what you do is you create group and just call it star or sun or whatever the name of that is. Okay? And don't worry about scale quite yet. We're just going to have it about that size will be good. We'll play around with rotations and everything else like that. Let's just build the largest thing. We start with our star or our sun, and now we can start with our planets. Okay, and the way that I'll set this rule is maybe I'll start with the planets closest to the sun and then furthest away from the sun. And then we'll set them in a particular order. So let's go open up that shape tool again. So let's make a planet that's closest to the sun, which means it's probably going to be hot. It's probably going to be inhospitable unless you have maybe some kind of species that can survive within scorching heats. So let's go ahead and choose this one right here where there's a little bit of red, a little bit more red and a little bit more yellow to it. And don't worry, you can make it big for now. I think that looks about right. And we'll scale it down. And then I'm not sure if I want it to be blurred or not. Let's turn that blur off. I'm going to put it right next to the sun. I don't want it to be bigger than my sun, because the sun is going to be, your star is probably going to be your largest mass within your cosmology map. I'll go ahead and place this here. You could blur it if you want to. It is super close to the sun, but I'll turn that off for now. We won't do with blur. And if you see that the textures are still kind of blurry, you can always change the scale. So if you go down into here, into your fill texture, and then you go down to your size, it will show the size. Oopsie, that's the size of the stamp itself. My mistake. I want to show the size, changing the size of the texture. Here we go. Fill texture scale. Here we go. And you can change the fill this way. I think the blur is still on. There we go. And you can change the fill scale like this. So depending on how much you want to have it, I try not to make it super small in scale because then the artifacts start to repeat. So make sure it's big enough to where the artifacts and the texture don't repeat. And I want to make them big enough because when I scale it down, they're also going to be smaller. So let's just say that our first planet is maybe like this volcanic kind of planet, and it's relatively small. And so we'll put that right next to the planet. So that first rule, remember the planets close to the sun are going to be the hottest, right? And so we'll do that. Now, the other thing that I want to do is I might want to even show that there is kind of a cool side and a warm side. So let's talk about shadow work on your planet. And so all you have to do is just copy and paste what you've already created, turn off the stroke color, and then change the fill color to black. And I'll actually make my background maybe a gray color just so that I can kind of see. This is going to be the shadow, and I'll place it right on top of it like this, or at least right next to it. And then what I'll do is I'll create subtract or preview. And then I'm going to create a circle again. I'm going to place it right over here like this. And then I'm going to choose subtract. But first I'll maybe push this a little bit more this way. There we go, a little bit more this way, there we go. And then I'm going to go subtract. And then I'm going to go to blur. And we're going to blur a lot. There we go. And then we'll bring the opacity down. And I'm going to put that right over the planet, just like that. And I'm going to make sure that the shadow isn't kind of lingering over the planet too much. Let's change the opacity a little bit higher. I want to really show the dark side and the light side. And it's okay if there's a little bit of light showing up on the back side of the planet because there might be other bodies in which light is reflecting off of. Okay, and so it's okay to have a little bit of light behind it. Then you're going to take that same thing again. You're going to make sure you're going to do the fill with white. Oopsie, I don't want that one. Not while it's selected. My bad. There we go. Choose white. Like this. I'm going to go to add. And then I can place that white part right on top there. Let's bring the opacity down. Let's bring the blur up. And I might want to even change it to overlay. And then I can bring the opacity up. There we go. And now I have this light side. So you see the idea. You create a crescent shape using the shape tool with the black color, and then just bring the blur, and then you'll remove that part of it to make that crescent shape, and then you'll create a white part with overlay to create the sun part. And all you have to do then is just create group, or just select it and press G, and then we can call this Vulcan, or whatever you want to call it, Vulcus, whatever you want to call it. And then the rule is that when you place a planet, you simply need to rotate the sunny side on facing towards the sun. So there's your trick right there. And you can make all your planets like that. And what's really cool is that once you've made one planet, you can copy and paste, and then you can open that planet, and then you can start changing the texture. So let's say we want another planet that's close to the sun, but it's not quite as hot. And so we could have maybe this kind of shape right here. And you'll notice that the shadow and the light source remain on the stamp. And so there you don't have to create all these different shapes. You just simply have to copy and paste the shape that you're already working on. And so there's our next planet. So you're seeing that it's not too complex. Once you've made one, you've made a lot. So kind of useful there to know those tricks. We'll make this one just a little bit bigger. I'll make this one smaller, and I'll make this a little bit bigger as well. Did I turn? There we go. Okay, let's make it a little bit bigger. There we go. Okay, this looks good. And don't worry about the shadow. You can see this black shadow right here on this gray. But once you've painted in black, you won't see that shadow anymore. So if I fill it, you won't see that. You won't see that shadow anymore. So now you're just doing a lot less work because you can just copy and paste things as you see fit. Let's make another planet. And you might be wondering, like, well, these are all just single textures. What happens if I want to make a planet that has ocean as well as land and things like that? Not complex. We're going to use multiple textures to do that. So sweet little trick here. Now, because this planet is going to have multiple biomes and stuff on it, I'm not going to use yellow. I'll use a white for the stroke. This is going to be like the light that's reflected off of the planet. And then the next step is to choose a texture. And what I'll do is I'm going to choose a water texture. It's going to represent the water, right? So there's that water part. Let's change the scale of it a little bit so that we can kind of see more. There we go. Now that we have the scale there, great. Okay. Now the next step is to copy and paste. I'm going to copy and paste this whole thing. Perfect. I'm going to turn the stroke off. And then I'm going to change it to whatever color that you want to use for your landmass. Let's just use maybe moss. This will work just fine. We'll change that texture. It's even got some lighter and darker regions in it, so that looks kind of nice. And just to pop out that, I'll bring the contrast up just to make sure that those really pop out more. So you have a little more contrast, and we'll desaturate it a little bit. There we go. And now all I have to do is just go through, select the shape, go to subtract, and then use the brush right here. And my recommendation is to have the planet be bigger because the brush only gets so big, right? The brush can only get so big. And so you have to scale it up for this to work. So now I'll just go to subtract, and I can go in and just kind of create the land masses that I want. So I'll subtract this. That's going to be some right there. Go in, I'll subtract this. And we're just going to create the shape. What's really cool is we'll scale it back down to fit right over that. So let's go ahead and create some more shapes here. Let's create another one right here. Don't worry about making them perfect yet. Just worry about getting the shapes together. And then we can worry about creating the negative space. We'll put another shape right here. Don't worry about details, because remember, this is going to be scaled down quite a bit. So don't sweat yourself. We're trying to make these highly detailed continents, because remember, it's going to be scaled down. So don't give yourself all that hard work. Don't worry about details. Just get the general landmass shapes, because you're not going to put any mountains. You're not going to put any terrain on it. At this scale, you would not be able to see those things. So don't stress about adding in all that stuff. Focus on just creating the basic stuff. And then I'll go in, go to add, and just add in the basic details. So that way I got some nice details in here. Don't want to do anything crazy, just basic. There we go. Just to kind of break up the shapes a little bit. Oop, for some reason I can't see my chat window. So if anyone's saying in the chat, I can't see you, unfortunately. Must not be working. I'm not sure what that's about. Okay. Now that we've got that, now I can just go in and I want to be able to select all these. So create group, call it land. And then I can just scale it back down to go right over the planet. And you might have to scale a little bit to kind of fit it on there, right? There we go. Just make sure that I fit it in there. Go. And one thing I can do is I can take this blue one and then bring the line up. So if I go here and then go to layer offset, I can bring the line above that green mass there. There we go. Let's move the planet a little bit so it kind of lines up properly. And then there you go. You got your whole planet right there. And so we can scale this to where we want it to be. And of course you can change these as well. So if you want, you can go in and change this mass to be a different color. So maybe you want it to be this brown dirt color. Maybe you want this one right here to be an orange color. So that's the beauty of it, is you can change those things up. Or you can just use a clipping mask and paint everything on by hand. I don't recommend that, because then you have to, like, when you move the planet, then you'll have to change the texture again. So doing it this way is probably the quicker way to do it. So you get the general idea on how to make a planet, and you can see that, again, the light source and the shadow remains on top of it, which is super, super helpful. And I'll make sure that those shadows stay above as well. So we'll go above here. There we go. I noticed that the shadow was below the land. I want it to be above. There we go. Not complex, pretty easy stuff, huh? So you can make planets very, very easily. And then you can just kind of go through that gambit. You know, go through this and just make a whole bunch of them. So I can go ahead and turn off the land on this one. Let's say I want a pure watery planet or a Fey-like planet. I can do that. So I can go into textures here. Let's go into Fey. Let's see here. Fey forest should be good. There's some interesting purple, some interesting green ones here. I like this purple one right here. And it even kind of looks like land masses a little bit. That's kind of cool. I could play a little bit with contrast to kind of make those pop out. Maybe play with the brightness. If I want to, I can change the hue to make it multiple, make it look differently. It's up to you and how you want to do it. I think a Fey planet looks kind of cool. And that could be like a big one or a small one. And this is not the arrangement perfectly. We'll change the arrangement as we go. A lot more can change. Don't want it to be all the same size. Change up each size of these. Okay. All right. Perfect. All right. Sorry if people are asking questions. I can't see the chat, unfortunately. Something happened there. Okay, we're just going to change it to Cosmology map. We're going to save it. Okay, so you guys get the basic ideas, some of the basic principles. Set some rules, like I said, with the light source, with the heat, what time of sun, what kind of sun it is, can determine a lot of the physics within the planets that you're making, their proximity to the sun. All of those things play huge roles in their development. But you've got, and then we talked about using the shape tool to create these planets. And so we've only gone 18 minutes in. We've already created the sun and a bunch of planets here. So we're kind of moving along and it's working out rather well. Let's add in some other things here. So let's talk about making orbits. What happens if I want to have a planet that has a moon or moons, right? So how would I do that? So let's say this planet right here has a moon. Again, I would scale it up just so that you can, you're not dealing with this tiny little stamp to edit and work with. Next, I'll go ahead and just copy and place a planet. And then I'm going to open this group up and I'm going to choose a texture. So if I want this moon to have maybe, make it look like it's got some cracks on it, well, maybe bring the brightness up on it, especially if it's refracting a lot of, or reflecting a lot of this, the light from the sun. You might want to change the contrast on it as well to kind of get some more of the cracks and crevices. That's kind of bringing that brightness up. I want it to be pretty bright. We can even, let's see here. We can even change the saturation to make it almost completely gray. There we go. So we have our first moon there. And my recommendation is to use the shape tool to create your orbits. So this is pretty cool. What we'll do is use the shape tool, use circle, turn off your fill, use stamp. And what you'll do is you're going to go click Inkarnate so that way you can open up all stamps. Let the catalog load all the stamps for you. And we're going to create orbits. And one of the best stamps for orbits in my mind is the wave. So you have these nice pond waves right here. these are going to work great for orbits. And because they're not going to be popping out a lot, right? They're going to look a little bit different. My only suggestion when using this is that you turn merge shape off. So that way it doesn't accidentally merge with any of these. You don't want to do that. So what we'll do is we'll create the orbit that we want. All right, and you can barely see the stamp, but I'll scale it up. And as I scale it up, you can kind of see the stamp. So these waves work great for an orbit. And if you're wondering, well, wait a minute, I can see the back side. I can see the back side of the ring. Don't worry about that. I'll show you how to fix that. We're going to use the portal tool to remove that. So let's pick an orbit. And what I like to do is I don't like to have my orbits be perfectly horizontal. I might rotate it just a little bit like this so that way I have a nice little orbit, nice rotation there. And then I'll take this, make sure that it goes above the orbit so I can't see that. So right on top of it. And then what I'll do is I'll select this orbit, go back, select portals, and I'll go over here and I'll just make a portal right here so that way the line work doesn't show up on top of here. So I'll move that. There we go. And there's our portal. And then now your ring is not popping up in front. So that's how you make your orbits. And you can make multiple. You could copy, paste, make another one, just make it bigger. Because if it's the same orbit, something might crash unless they're further enough away from each other. But you can have multiple orbits around a planet. We can copy and paste. Let's just make another variation of this one. We can use a different texture if we want. Let's see, we're in fantasy battle maps. Let's see here. We could use whatever texture that we kind of want here. Let's use this one. I kind of like this one, but it's a little bit bright. So we'll have to change some of these settings. Let's bring the brightness down. Let's bring the contrast down a little bit. Bring the saturation up. There we go. And then we'll make this one a little bit smaller, maybe. Now, just so you know, when it comes to orbits, this is all about how you want to, and this will also have to be changed. You can see the portal's messed up there. Is that normally, like in reality, there's ellipticals when there's orbits around a planet, but because it's fantasy, you don't have to show the exact physics. Normally it would look like this, because there's like this slingshot effect, because the gravity of the planet is throwing the planet further away, and then it kind of slingshots itself back into the orbit. And so that's what you would normally have. Probably orbits look more like that, but you don't have to do that here. That's really up to you. Just make sure that you fix the portal, because you'll notice that the portal is off. So I just got to go in like this and just make sure that the portal stays like this. There you go. And then you have your multiple kind of orbits for your planets there. This seems a little too, let's bring the scale. Oh, not this one. This one scales a little too big. So let's bring it down a bit. There we go. Okay. So you kind of get the general idea how that works. And then I can just create group, planet, and then now I have my orbits. And then you can also just rotate this. Just remember to make sure that the shadow side goes away from the sun and the light side goes towards the sun. So you just have to remember those tricks when you're doing that. Because if you have the dark side being facing the sun, that's going to look a little odd, right? It's not going to make any sense. So make that light side. So this is one of the reasons why I make the light and the dark side. It's just easy to rotate them. Wherever the sun is where the light source is. So kind of a super easy trick there. Let's go ahead and bring this scale down on this. You see how small the planets and the orbits get? Pretty tiny stuff. So now you know how to make that. Let's make a couple more planets, and then we'll go ahead and work on that next step, which is kind of putting together the grand design. Like, how do I want to do it? Do I want to have it be a circular orbits at an angle, like isometric? Do I want to have it be a side view where there's going to be some distance between each of the planets, or what? We're going to come up with a style. But first, let's just add in a couple more planets. I think maybe 6 or 7 planets might be good. Let's copy and paste this one. We'll go back in, and we'll change the texture. And there's all these cool textures that we can choose from. Again, so many different options. Pick one that looks best to you. Like, I like this one right here. This has a nice look to it. This, like, maybe you have a forest planet that's just like covered in woods. So you could have like this kind of forest-like planet if you wanted to. And in fact, we can even make the shape on this just a little bit darker just to really show that dark part of the shape there. There we go. Put that light part on this side. So if you wanted to have like maybe a planet that's just made out of trees, you could do that. You could also use, I do believe there is a good one for this. Let me look up, oh, this one right here might work for it. See, it's kind of the same as that one. I don't want to do that. I want to make it a little bit different. Ooh, what's this right here? Oh, I like this. This looks good. But the scale looks a little bit off. There we go. Kind of has that illusion of shapes there. Let's maybe bring the contrast up a little bit just to bring out some more of the artifacts. Bring the contrast up a little bit. There we go. Darkens up the shapes. Yep, like that. Looks good. And I'll just scale it down. So another planet right there. And then we'll make one more planet. And then we'll go and start placing them together. Okay, here we go. All right, well, let's take a look at them. Maybe let's do like steampunk-like planet or something that's like made of machines or something like that. So what we could do is use this right here, and then we'll turn off. It's possible we can just turn off the stroke here, and we can make like a mechanical-like one if you wanted to. That could be interesting. Change up the scale here. You could use like one that's made of pipe. So if you wanted to show that it was a planet made out of pipe works, some kind of mechanical planet, all kinds of things that you can mess with there. Let's see here. There's so many textures in the fantasy battle map style that we can kind of choose from. So let's play around with them. Let's say you have like a waste planet that's been scorched. It's kind of falling apart. You can go with that one. So lots of different fun shapes. We'll scale this up a little bit just to give it a little bit of a darker side there. There we go. Yeah, I kind of like this scorched light planet. In fact, we'll kind of move maybe this one over into here somewhere just to kind of give it a nice feel to it. Look closer. Here we go. Like maybe it was a planet that died. No longer can sustain life. Okay, I think that's going to be enough planets for now. There's 6 there. We can add more as we go. So let's go ahead and do the setup. So there are multiple ways that we can do what's called like the layout, right? We could just do a straight side view where it's just like this, where you have the planets lined up in a straight line. And then you can have some kind of way of measuring distance between them. You can do that, or you could have it to where you have these planets like this in this order. You could go with this instead if you wanted to. Lots of different ways that you can kind of go about setting up the setup. So maybe you want to do it that way, or maybe you want to have more of a vertical alignment. And then you can have them all lined up going in a row like this. I would do a different, what's the word I'm looking for? Aspect ratio for this, maybe portrait or one that's a little bit longer that way. So there's a lot of different ways that we can go about doing the orientation. My suggestion would be to, I think we'll follow the pattern of the last map that I showed for cosmology, and we'll put this in the center or very close to the center. It doesn't have to be perfectly centered. And then we'll create a series of orbits that go around it in kind of this isometric feel, because if you do it like this, you won't be able to see the orbits because it's at this straight angle. But if you do an isometric, you will be able to see the orbits. So let's go ahead and talk about how I would go about doing that. So first, I would use this whirl stamp. This stamp right here works wonders. It's a fantastic stamp. It works out great. It's going to represent like gases swirling around. It's going to work out perfect. So I'll put that right there. And what I'll do is I'll also rotate it because I don't want it to be perfectly, like this. And then I do want to blur it a little bit. I kind of like that. We'll go with that. And I think what I'll also do is maybe throw in a shadow to it, custom object shadow. And let's choose maybe a white shadow to go with it, or a yellow shadow maybe. Let's bring the intensity up. Oops, I've got it set to luminosity. Let's go back to normal. There we go. I was wondering why the color wasn't working. Now I know. And there we go. Get some color in there. Let's bring the opacity down. There we go. And then I might also change up the transform a little bit to change that width. There we go. Give it a little bit more width to it. You could use, there's a lot of different whirlpools actually in the catalog. You can use multiple, but this is kind of a good start. It'll kind of give us an idea about the churning of the galaxy, right? When you look at galaxies, they're these spiral-like galaxies. We're going to try to mimic that effect of these spiral galaxies. So we'll start with just placing some planets down, and then maybe we want to create their orbits. This kind of just represents that spiral effect. I'll lock that so I don't accidentally select it. And then I can use this same wave right here to kind of create my orbits. And so I'll create my first one here. Make sure that my stroke is up. There we go. I got my first orbit here. We'll put it right here like this. And what's nice is I can put it a little higher up so I don't even have to use the where I don't even have to use the portal. There we go. There we go. And this is the closest one to you, so we'll place that there. Just make sure it goes on top of it. Oopsie, this portal seems to be... Is this too low? Let's see here. What layer is this on? There we go. Okay, just want to make sure it's on top. There we go. What's cool is you can just copy and paste this orbit, rotate it, and then you can create another orbit with it. The only thing is that when you do that is you have to rescale. Because once you scale it up, you notice that the stroke stamp scale is going up when I increase the scale of the whole shape. So just make sure that you reduce the scale of the stamp to make up for that difference, okay? Just remember that trick there. Okay, let's create maybe this, put this planet here. When I'm placing them down, what I want to do is I want to maybe balance them out to create a balanced like setup. So I don't want to put this planet right here where I put the other one on the other ring or orbit. That looks weird. So what I might do is place it right here. So where it's overlapping the other orbit of the other planet and it's balancing out. So as I'm placing each planet, I'm going to balance them out so that that way the composition is well balanced. Okay, let's go ahead and create another orbit. Put it right on top like this. And again, remember to play with that scale. There we go. We'll put that next planet on there. We'll put that one right here. We're going to balance it out. Remember, keep balancing it out. And we'll bring the scale up here. Oopsie, we'll mess with this. Oopsie, I want to make sure that scale goes up. There we go. Perfect. Matter of fact, I'm going to take all these planets and kind of bring their scale up right away. Just do that right now. Get it out of the way. Let's just continue adding more and more rings or orbits. Bigger one right here with this one. And let's put a balance. We'll put it over here. And then we'll put one more planet down. One last giant orbit. I can just go right on top. Just make sure I don't mash into other orbits. Go. And because I don't really have a whole lot out here, we'll put one over here. This big one out in the back. And then copy paste. We'll maybe scale down a little bit and then put another one in here. Right here like this. Let's go right. Let's see. Right here should be good, I think. And then I'll put that planet right there. Right here should be good. There we go. Now, a lot of these pond waves are a little too big for my taste. So let's bring the opacity down a little bit so that way they're not so intrusive. There we go. And we'll bring the scale down a little bit. There we go. Kind of a cool effect to watch that, isn't it? Whee! Fun stuff. Okay. All right. So there's a lot going on here. Let's go ahead and save it at 106 changes. And then we'll kind of move on to that next step where we want to make sure that we throw in stars, that we throw in some celestial elements like a quasar or a wormhole or a pulsar or whatever. There's a lot of different things that we can kind of make in here. Let's start with doing some textures first to kind of really show that spiral galaxy effect. So what's really great is if you go in and you just type in light or fey, there should be some fey lights that we can work with. Oop, not popping up. Let's try it one more time. Fey. There we go. Let's start with gold, yellow fey lights, and we'll put that by the sun. So we'll make sure that I got the texture scale right. There we go. And it does look like, make sure that I got the color right. This is yellow, right? There we go. Okay. Let's go ahead and take a step back, and let's go ahead and put yellow spark all the way around the sun. That will add that part. So that part's done. Now let's go ahead and use white fey lights, and let's just bring the opacity down. And what we're going to do is we're going to highlight some of the orbits. So I'll go around like this, and you'll see that there's multiple. We'll create like stardust and stuff kind of going around each orbit. I want to follow each one of these orbits with this nice white Fade light texture. It's fine here. Really just kind of get those lights really in there. There we go. Okay, and I'm not really satisfied with that spiral, that whirlpool. I'm not really a fan of the shadow that was on it. There we go. That's a little bit better. That was kind of messing me up a little bit. And then I can go ahead and select the whole thing. I can rotate it just a little bit. There we go. And I want to scale it to make sure that nothing is out of orbit. There we go. Okay, cool. So we've got that part done. I still think that some of these shapes are still a little too big. So let's bring that stroke scale down. There we go. Still a little too massive for my taste. Great, we're getting there. All right, let's keep going. All right, cool. So you've got the general idea of putting the sun, putting everything in its orbits, and we want to add in some fun stuff. So let's go ahead and throw in, let's go back to Inkarnate and throw in Whirl. There's a nice whirlpool right here. Let's go ahead and use this to create some kind of pulsar or quasar. So let's go ahead and turn the blur off. Let's place this down like this. Let's change the shadow to, let's see your shadow, custom object shadow. Let's make it blue. I think that should be good. Maybe like a pulsar or a quasar. Let's bring our intensity up. Hold on a second. My computer is freezing for a moment. There we go. Mistake. There we go. Cool. There we go. Great. All right. Nice. Already you can kind of see that that kind of starts to make a little swirl together, doesn't it? Kind of nice, huh? And then let's go into fantasy, or not fantasy, my mistake, into sci-fi battle maps. And there's some nice stamps in here that will work, kind of represent like those beams of light that comes out of a pulsar or a quasar. Let me see if I can find that. You could use this thing right here. This right here would work fine, normal. You could put that down like that on top of that if you want to. You could do, 1 second while I find that beam here. Let me expand all assets here. There is supposed to be like a thruster beam, I think, and that should work out just fine. I just got to remember where it is. There it is right there. Perfect. And it's blue already. Perfect. Great. And we'll put one on top coming out like this. And then I'll bring the layer down and put one underneath of it. There you go. And then they're a little on the bright side, so I'll just bring the opacity down just a little bit. There we go. And then I can just copy and paste these, create group, or select them, and then place these off like this. You know, I see you have a little quasar over there. Let's add in some more celestial stuff. Let's add in a cloud. You know, there's a lot of like dust clouds and particles and stuff in space, and so we can totally use these cloud stamps. These are perfect. And what we can do is we can change the color of them. I recommend that you use the ones that have a little bit of color in it instead of the pure white ones, because if you don't, you won't be able to change the saturation of them. Because you see a lot of these beautiful nebula colors, blues, purples, these beautiful colors. And so it's good to have that nebula color. And so to do that, you're going to want to use a cloud that's not pure white or gray, so that way it can be adjusted. Now, some things you can do is you can bump the contrast up. And what the contrast will do is it will make the color a little bit more vibrant, so you can kind of mess with it. Now, I've already got a blue quasar over there, so let's do something kind of greenish. And then we can also change the blend mode as well. And the blend mode will make it interact with the things around it. So we got screen. This like looks how it interacts with that. That's kind of cool. We'll do overlay, hard light, difference. You know, I kind of like that hard light. Let's bring the opacity down a little bit. And let's see here. Let me try using a different one. That shape is kind of odd. Let's use this one. Cool. And what we'll do is we'll create like a green nebula that will have like a star cluster inside of it. Let's move it over here. And then what I'll do is I'll use sparks. Sparks or snow. Either one of these work fine. I like sparks because they do have some of the lights kind of popping out of it a little bit. So these kind of work out well. And I'll just put this right on top here. Let's bring the opacity up, and I can create this nice cluster of stars within here. Then I'll also bring the opacity down and make a big version. So you have a series of star clusters inside of this green thing right here. So that works out great. And then we might even want to add in, maybe there's a storm or something inside of it, or you want to add some kind of maelstrom. You could add in some kind of spark or something to represent a storm. Like we can change this to U to make it green. Like maybe there's kind of an unstable star or an unstable planet right there. So you got the little spark there. That works out great. Let's say this isn't a storm. This is just a nebula, but we can also make a space storm with the same concepts. We can use that same cloud to kind of represent a storm, but this time we'll just change the U. Maybe we want it to be a purplish color. That'll work good. And then we can change the blend modes to kind of play around with that. I like that right there. That looks good. Difference. There we go. It even makes the stars behind it turn black, which I think is a nice little effect there. So let's go do that. And let's bring the contrast, make it a little bit more purple. There we go. And I'll make this storm maybe over here. And then what I'll do is I'll just type in electricity or elect, ELE like this. And let's type in fantasy battle maps. And there should be some electricity right here. This will represent the storm. And so we'll place a couple of these electricity stamps kind of coming out like this. Make sure I put some on top as well. There we go. Now you have a little storm right here, and then we can do the same thing. I like the black spot, so I'll use the black. I'll use the sparks, and I'll change them to black so I can get that nice black kind of effect. So we got a nice little space storm over here, or you can call it some kind of maelstrom of some kind. And then, of course, we also want to add some light sources as well to kind of give it some more light to it. So I'll throw in a light source. I'll put it on top layer here using this orange one. I'm going to place it right here so that this way my light effect is affecting the other planets around it. See how the light source is there? Put that right on top. And then I'll place another one, but this time what I can do is I can go to normal so that I can see it. And then this way when I change the hue, I can see it better. So there's my purple. We'll go to lighten or screen or overlay and just place that right on top right there. And then you can see that it affects the light around it, giving that color to it. And then I can just copy and paste, put another one right on top of here. I actually like the purple on top, just like that. That looks nice. We'll put that on top of there. I was going to make it blue, but I think the purple and blue look really good together. Let's copy and paste another one. Put that on top there. We'll change the hue a little bit. There we go. And I'll put the light on this side. There we go. Copy, paste. Let's put one down on here. Let's go with maybe a green color. And we'll put it over on this side. There we go. Add a green color light right here. I think that looks good for that galaxy. Okay, we're 122 changes. We'll save it. I see you're kind of getting the general idea how to put things together, right? You're going to make your planetary bodies, your planets, and your stars with your shape tool. And then you'll use stamps to kind of fill in the extra space with other stuff. So you'll make maybe a quasar or a pulsar, some kind of space storm. Maybe you want to make like an eldritch galaxy or something where there's like a squid, like an eldritch being inside of it. Like maybe this green space over here has an eldritch creature living inside of it. So we can take this squid right here and just make it pure black. And then blur it maybe a little bit. And maybe there's a kind of this squid-like eldritch creature living inside of here. We could even use maybe some black stamps that we used here. Put that right on top of it, just so it's not like this black blurred creature. You got a little bit of spark around it right there. So you have like an eldritch galaxy here. Dangerous place. We don't want people... don't want people necessarily going to that nebula over there because they might be eaten alive by that massive eldritch squid in there. It's a lot of cool different options. And then from here, right now you kind of have all the tools that you need to start putting together a cosmology map, lots of different things. And you can take a lot of the same things, like I can copy and paste this, and maybe I want to make this a different color quasar. So I can go ahead and change the hue. I can make it a green one. Go into here, make the shadow green. And then I have a green, smaller quasar, like over here or something like that. Kind of looks like a top, doesn't it? So you can kind of reuse stamps, change things around, and that way you kind of get multiple different effects and things like that. And then from there, you're going to want to like label your planets. My suggestion is to maybe use a sci-fi texture or text font that you might want to do. You can name a planet whatever you want. Quasar, you can put that there. And then you can kind of just copy and paste each text just right next to each planet. A little bit of pre-planning is helpful, like having some ideas on what you want, but I like to use the method of proximity to the sun for a lot of like what a planet's and ecology is going to be like, its environment, its proximity to the sun. So, again, close to the sun, it's going to be really hot, maybe uninhabitable, or there might be a dark side. Maybe this planet doesn't spin, there's low gravity, and so there's only a dark side and a light side. It doesn't spin, there's no gravity, and so therefore you can only live on the dark side to survive of that planet. So kind of using the physics to figure out how a planet is going to operate is super important. That's why I generally make the sun first, and then I make all my other planets after that, and so that way I have some physics to work with. Its proximity to the sun, and then again, it doesn't have to be perfect, because all the time that you're taking coming up with the rules and mechanics for your galaxy or your world is going to take up all the time that you would have to kind of work yourself through your campaign and putting together your encounters and stuff like that. If you get hyper fixated on super realism, you'll really, really get lost and just give yourself so much work as a DM. And so that's why I just don't recommend going with super, super duper realistic enough to where it's believable to your players, but also fantastical enough that it catches the eye and it looks intriguing for your players. That's why it's super important to not focus so much on the perfection of the physics and just take a couple physics elements that are useful to help to make the map easier, right? If you're following all these rules, it's just going to take so much longer for you to make the map. You have to make sure that the distance is right, the scale is right. Don't worry about all that. That's a lot of work. That stuff makes more sense probably when it comes to making like a world map, where it might be easier for you to put together all the climates and the terrain. But at this scale and just how much work it is, it's just too much. Like as a DM, give yourself less work. Okay, so don't focus too much on hyper realism. Focus on believable enough to where it makes sense to the player's eye, but it's also fantastic enough to where it pops out and it catches the user's eye or the player's eye. Okay, it's kind of important when you're putting together your stuff there. Where are we at for time? We are at 47. I think we're kind of good, but I think you guys get the general idea on how to kind of make a cosmology map like this. Again, multiple ways that you can do it. You don't have to do it this isometric way. You could do it a straight side view where all the planets are lined up. If you go onto Pinterest or images from some kind of search engine, you'll notice that there are many, many different cosmology type maps that are out there of our own galaxy, fictional galaxies, Warhammer 40K, whatever it might be. A lot of different ideas out there. Go do your research, find a style that you like, that looks intriguing, and then you can mimic that style and then add your own artistic element to it. I never go to a reference and then copy it perfectly. I take elements from a reference that I like, and then I'll look at other references and take elements from that I like. There's all kinds of ways to kind of go about doing it. Let's, at 48, we can do just a couple more things. Let's talk about how to touch base on maybe territories. Maybe I want to show a territory that belongs to a certain planet. So maybe like this is their space that they operate in. So what we'll use is shape tool, use the pen. And then what I'll do is I'm going to use dotted lines to kind of represent territories. Think of it as borders for nations, only borders for planets. Think of it that way. And I'll make sure that I'll go ahead and just create the pen shapes and I'll create a shape that I want to represent that particular space and make sure there's no fill. And if I just go to plus, you'll see that I have this nice little quadrant that kind of shows up. And then from here, I can kind of make all the various quadrants by kind of connecting them together, kind of like that. So there's various ways that you can kind of go about connecting the various plans. Make sure that your merge shape is off so you don't accidentally merge the shapes. Just kind of remember that. And again, what we're doing is we're creating the territory in which these planets operate, right? So how do you know if you're in the territory of whatever planet that is, right? This will help you to kind of discover that by creating these dashed lines that represents these borders. So we say go to plus, there's another border there. Let's create another one over here for this one. I know I labeled everything quasar, but I just wanted to put the text on. Maybe we will have to do from beginning to end a world building session where we start with a cosmology map and then just kind of make each planet and each world. I think that'd be a really kind of a fun series. Okay, let's go ahead and add in the next one. All these kind of cool things that you can kind of do. And the way that you make the shapes is just don't make them all the same. Make very unique shapes. Maybe have them some look like a kidney bean. Maybe have them some weird... Oopsie, I used the line tool there. My mistake. Don't make that mistake. Use the shape tool because the line tool won't connect them. You'll have to do that manually. So the shape tool right here with the pen will connect that automatically for you. There we go. Okay, went there. Let's add another space here. Normally what I'll end up doing is if the planet is a little bit bigger, then the space in which it operates will be a little bit bigger. And just remember, it's a made-up border, just like a nation and its border. So we'll go plus, there you go. And so here you go. Now you have your various types of... Now you can also create like space lanes if you wanted to. Like maybe you wanted to show a space lane that goes from maybe one planet or the other. You could totally do that. You could use... let's see here. We could go to... where are we at for time here? Yeah, we still got a little bit of time. Let's go to sci-fi battle maps. There should be some beams. I think these right here work great. We could use these to kind of represent like a light speed, a warp course or some kind. And so what we'll do is we'll use the pen and the line, and then maybe I want to show, I'll hold, click, and then drag, and then I can create this like arch that goes from one space to the other. And let's just make sure that I change things up. Let's bring the opacity down. And maybe I want to create like these kind of, think of them as like shipping lanes on your world, only they're hyperlanes, right, for your hyperlight travel. And so the way that you do it again is you click, hold, drag, and that way you can create that curve. And so I'll just go ahead and create all these curves going from planet to planet, and I'll move the text so that way it's not blocking it. So when the label's there, it won't be hiding it. And this is kind of a way to create like your hyperlanes. So kind of a nice little trick that you can kind of do there to create that. So let's go ahead and create another one going here, and then another one that maybe goes over to here like this. Maybe it's the same port, so it kind of goes over to here like this. And so you can kind of create these nice ports, kind of a nice little trick that you can do there. You could do a straight line if you want to. They don't have to be curves. But normally when it comes to like in the hyperlight space, you can be straight line or a curve. I add the curves in there because I think curves are just more interesting. There is a lot of curves already on it, so you could totally just do a straight line if you wanted to as well. That's up to you. It really doesn't matter which way you want to go about doing it. I just think the curves look more interesting. So things that you can kind of add there. You can also add in some, maybe we want to show in, put in a vignette. Well, I don't think the vignette will be necessary. Maybe we'll do like a cloud, or we can use sparks right here. Here we go. You got these nice sparks right here. Let's set to repeat, and then we'll change the size of them. So the sparks will add a little extra stars. You can also add snow. That will add an extra bit of stars to it as well. We'll bring the size down. There we go on the snow. You can do that. You can also, maybe you want to show like nebula or whatever around. So we could add in like a cloud filter as well. I can go in here, go to add, oopsie, let's go to, did I add it in there? Color adjustment, there it is, perfect. When I add that, let's go add that, those clouds real quick. Let's see here, Inkarnate. Landscape, perfect. And then I can kind of add these clouds right here. And what's really cool about this is I can kind of change the blend modes if I need to. It's just, these are going to represent kind of like nebula that are in the background. I can bring the opacity way down like this, and then I can use light sources so that way it doesn't look like clouds. So I can go in with these multiple light sources that I've created. And then I can go and put them right up against the clouds, and that way it won't look like they are specifically clouds. They're going to look like nebula, because there's usually a lot of color when you see a nebula. And so this will be kind of helpful. So I can copy and paste this green color and put it all up against here. Perfect. And then maybe I want to take this purple color right here, copy, paste, put that one right here. If I can get that light in, copy, paste, put another one over here, make it blue this time. There we go. Now I have a nice blue texture there. And so you can see that you can create multiple, you can kind of create these nice effects. These clouds are not clouds, they're actually a big, maybe it's an Oort cloud, maybe it's a giant nebula that's around it. There's all kinds of ways. So nice little tricks there that you can kind of create more galaxy stuff there. All right, well, I think I've kind of explained overall just the general way of kind of putting together this style. You could use coats of arms to represent empires, to show things. You could have multiple moons. You could have it to be where there's maybe some other elements up in thing, like maybe there's a giant statue floating in space that's like a giant citadel of some kind, or maybe there's a Dyson sphere around the sun. So whatever, be creative, have fun, but you kind of get the general idea on how I kind of make this kind of map. Super easy to put together. You just got to make the light source, the sun, first, make all the planets, make the orbits, and then start putting together all the details, the stars, the celestial bodies, and those all the other things. So lots of cool things that you can do with this. Just be creative, play around, mess around with the filters to kind of get the cool effect you want. You notice that I did do this color adjustment, so you could always like boost that brightness up to make it pop out more. You could bump up the contrast. You could play with the saturation to make the color pop out, just get a lot of color to pop out. You could even change the hue if you want. So you wanted to have it be different colors. So maybe you wanted to have it be like a green sun, or maybe you wanted it to have this. So lots of really cool things that you can kind of play with when you're wanting to make your maps. So super cool stuff. Well, hey, thank you everyone. I do believe we have creating a epic world map, or creating an epic world stream coming up on Friday. I think it's part 5. We'll be continuing making our biomes on that stream, so I'm looking forward to that. I'm sorry if I didn't get around to answering any questions in the chat. For some reason, nothing is popping up in the chat, so I apologize for that. So hopefully I will see you all on Friday. Thank you so much for watching. Please stay safe and healthy, and merry map making, my friends, okay? Take it easy, all right? Bye.